Hi, it's JamesAnimalHarrison. It's Tip Tuesday. Today we're going to talk about backline gear. If you don't know what that means, basically backline gear is gear that a company or music store, a rental company, or even an individual rents out or provides as usable gear for a performer. Sometimes let's say there's a band that is coming to play an event or something and they're on tour, but they're flying in for this date and their equipment's not coming, so they rent backline. Typically a guitarist will carry their guitar, maybe an effects case with a pedal board or something. The drummer will carry their stick bag or something like that, maybe a snare, and then everything else they rent. And a rental backline gear can be a curse or it can be a blessing. I've been on both ends of it. So let me just say first, as a performer, if you're in a situation, where you have to use backline gear, if you can get away with it, I recommend taking, in a rock situation anyway, a bass drum pedal and a snare drum. Those are the most unique things to you in rock. The reason I suggest a bass drum pedal is because you're never going to find one that's going to feel exactly like what you're really used to. And so if you could take a pedal, that's great. If you can't, and you get time to mess with it, that's wonderful. But sometimes you're in situations where it's so quick to get in and out, it's very difficult to have the time to adjust it. A snare, again, I like to have a snare because I know what it's going to sound like. I know how it's going to feel. And I know I'm going to take something that's going to be durable and worthy of the way I play it. So if I'm playing backbeats and hitting rim shots at every 2 and 4, it's not going to detune. If it does, by the way, in my stick bag, I always carry tuner fish lug locks. I did a video on that last week. So if you're with a rental snare and you get there and it's an entry level kit, not what you ordered, but that's what sometimes is provided, and I'm stuck with it. If I don't have a snare, I can put those on there to try to tune it and then hope that it's going to hold that pitch. With the tuner fish lug locks, it keeps the drum from detuning. That's the best thing about them. Also, if you're a person that buries the bass drum beater and you're showing up for a rental gear or a backline gear, make sure that you request that the bass drum head, the front head, has a hole cut in it so that the air can escape, and then you put your muffling, whatever you want, inside there. If you get one that has a couple of strips and no hole in the front head, and you bury the beater, it feels completely different. It sounds different. It doesn't give the drum the optimum sound it can have for that type of playing. There's nothing wrong with that, but if you bury the beater, it does create a problem. So if you're a person that buries the beater, ask for a drum with a hole in the front head, cut, obviously. And then, stuff I tend to carry around is I carry tape, like gaffer's tape, so I can mute or do anything I need to do. Sometimes I carry around like Vader buzzkills, and again, the tuner fish lug locks. Those are my #1 things. You never know what kind of cymbals you're going to get, no matter what you ask for. I've shown up and there have been entry-level cymbals where I've had to put gels or little bits of tape on the cymbal just to calm it down because it's ringing so much. And you can also be on the other end of that where everything you requested is there, and sometimes even more than you requested, and you get the top of the line. So be ready for anything. But my advice is carry around the equipment if you can. If you're in a situation where they're herding people in and 30 bands are playing and they're each playing 2 or 3 songs each, and they check the gear and they're just herding anybody in and out, and you don't have time to change that kit or adjust that kit, and they don't want you to, just deal with it for 2 or 3 songs. That's the best you can hope for, and then move on. On the other end of that, you can get some of the best gear possible, and then treat it as if it's yours. Don't abuse it. And then if you're on the side of providing gear for backline or renting it out, look at the rider and try to get as close as you can to what they're asking for. The more that you please them, the more the phone's going to ring for them to come back to you to say, hey, the last time we were there, we rented a kit from this guy. We want that kit again. And sometimes that will happen. My top 2 kits are a Yamaha Maple Custom and a Yamaha Recording Custom, both of which I've rented out several times. I'm very particular about who I rent to. If the phone rings, I'm looking it up at the same time. Who is this? Who's playing it? Who's it for? And if I see that it's a grunge band and the guy's there kicking equipment over or standing on the bass drum, and it's not going to be my equipment they're renting. That's just me, you know. And nothing against grunge bands. I love some of them. Or punk, and they're abusive to the equipment. It's not for me. I don't do that. If you're going to rent gear specifically, if you're going to buy gear specifically for rental gear, I recommend wrapped kits more than I do stained kits because they hold up to abuse better. The only thing you have to be careful is if you're out in the middle of the summer and they're in direct sunlight, you're going to ripple that finish. Make sure you get you some space-type blankets or something to reflect the sun away because it will ripple up the finish. There was a time when in the 80s and 90s where everybody requested on a rider, it said Yamaha Recording Custom or equivalent. And the reason they did that is because they knew that was Yamaha's top line kit. If they just put Yamaha or Pearl or Tama drums, well, each of those companies, Ludwig, any of them that you mentioned, Gretsch, they all offer several offerings, right? So you could get a top of the line Yamaha or you could get a student level entry kit. They don't want that for that type of gig. So that's why they started putting not only the brand, but the series of what they wanted, Recording Custom. They knew that or equivalent, that it would be somebody's top line. Sometimes if they can't get that and they get it from a provider that gives them another company's kit as an equivalent, and that artist may be a Yamaha artist, and they have to play a Pearl or a Tama kit, oftentimes you'll see they'll put gaffer tape over the front word on the bass drum. They used to do this a lot in the 80s and 90s. It's pretty much accepted anymore. If they see somebody behind a kit that's not the one they endorse, they know they were in a rental situation and then they had to play what they could get. But a lot of times they will tape up the word, and be careful because when they peel that off, sometimes that logo will come off with it and you'll lose that. I specifically bought heads that had no logos so that if I did rent my kit out and somebody, to say, was a Pearl artist, and they were renting a Yamaha, that all they could get was that I would just change the head on it so it didn't say anything. I've seen people actually put just the head of what the company is on any kit just to get it rented. As a provider, I try to get as close as I can to the rider. Most of the ones you're going to see nowadays are going to request DW. When DW first came on the scene, of course, the American-made drums, they only had one level, and it was a professional level kit, and it was a top of the line. So people got, well, if I request a DW, I'm going to get a top of the line kit because there was no lower level DWs. And so that became the industry standard, after it became the number one requested thing. And DW eventually added a couple of series that were a little bit lower line compared to their professional ones. And they also created the PDP line, which has several different lines in it. And it says PDP by DW. So sometimes you show up somewhere and there'd be a PDP kit, and it might be an entry-level PDP, but you want a DW, but because it says PDP, sometimes by DW, they would go, oh, it's DW. So a lot of times on riders, you'll see DW, no PDP. And again, the top-line PDP concepts, it's a nice kit. And most of the upper-level drums from any of the companies, when you get to the mid-ranges up, they're good quality kits and they sound good and they'll work. But most of the time, they're looking for that top quality. When I'm asked what I want and it's provided, I try to get the best I can. And if I can talk to them on the phone, it's even better because I can clarify some things. But if I can provide my own bass drum pedal, my own snare, sometimes even my own cymbals, I try to do that. So my tip is be as clear as possible if you're asking for the gear, and be compromising and making it work for both parties. as a provider, try to get as close as you can to that. And if you can't offer it, don't be afraid to communicate back and forth to say, I have this. And they'll go, oh, that's cool. I can do that. You know, a lot of times, you know, they don't like to be surprised. It's because a lot of times it's not the drummer themselves that's dealing with it. It's a road manager or something like that. And the drummer comes in expecting the rider to be met, and it's not there. And then they're upset sometimes. So, you know, on both sides, do what you can. Try to be good, providing the best equipment, but also sometimes be prepared for the worst and have what you can. If you have to deal with what you got, do the best you can and do with it. So there's my tips on Backline Gear.